welcome or welcome back to my podcast. This is Elizabeth King, a lifelong soccer player, a current high school senior, a formerly injured senior, and a committed soccer player. We already talked a bit about the role that parents and coaches can play in shaping the way that young athletes view the return to play protocol and their judgment in whether or not to receive treatment or play through injuries. But there is another very significant group of influencers in an athlete's life, which is their teammates. Teammates are often viewed as family in the world of youth sports. I'll be honest, my teammates are truly my best friends, and like I said, I view them as family. The bond between players is so unique because you have that immediate connection and understanding because of your sport. But it can create a whole new set of unique pressures. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about how the expectations of camaraderie and even competition between teammates and how that can influence an athlete's decision to ignore their injuries and play through pain. In many youth sports environments, there's a deeply ingrained culture of toughness. There's this idea that the strongest players are those who can endure pain and never show weakness. Teammates both consciously and unconsciously contribute to this culture, which then creates an atmosphere where showing pain or being honest about discomfort is viewed as a weakness. From a young age, athletes are taught that being part of a team means pushing through pain for the sake of the group. If one player sits out due to an injury, there may be subtle or overt hints that they are letting the team down or not pulling their weight. This creates pressure for other athletes to stay on the field even when they're hurt. Teammates, through their actions, behavior, maybe their language, can all amplify this message. In a study conducted by Nixon in 1993, it was noted that athletes often push through injuries because they fear being seen as less dedicated or less committed than their peers. This feeling of needing to prove one's toughness to teammates, of course, is a powerful motivator for athletes to ignore their injuries. Like I said in a previous episode, this has a lot of long-term consequences for their health. One of the most powerful forces in youth sports culture is peer pressure. When one athlete decides to play through an injury, often others follow that. If you see one person being celebrated for doing something, aren't you going to want to do the same thing? This phenomenon often occurs in sports like football, soccer, and basketball, where team dynamics are highly emphasized. A teammate may say, if you don't play, you're letting the team down, or, come on, we need you, just push through it, or, will one game hurt? Maybe we don't think about these things when we say them, but that doesn't mean they don't still hurt. I remember when I first got the news that I wasn't going to be able to finish out the season, I had multiple of my teammates tell me that one more game wouldn't hurt and that I didn't have to miss it. Or even when I told others the injury that I was experiencing, they would try to compare the injuries that they've had or talk about times that they've ignored injuries. It's those subtle ways that we make others feel so inferior. There's this shared sense of responsibility where teammates feel like they are letting each other down if they don't continue playing despite an injury. The unspoken agreement in these situations is that pain should be ignored for the sake of the team's success. Very much the "there's no I in team" sort of thing. Unfortunately, this often leads to a mindset where it's like if you do it, I'll do it. Players encourage one another to keep playing by bonding over their mutual experiences of pain. There's this suffering together feeling which can be empowering in the moment, but think of the cost that it's coming from. There's this risk of making the injuries worse or developing chronic issues down the road. It's weird. On my team, at least, when we would talk about injuries, sometimes it would end up in this weird competitive, who's had the most injuries, who's had the worst injuries, who's in the most amount of pain, and who's showing the most resiliency and all that stuff, right? Especially there was this one girl who'd always talk about how she had knee issues or whatever, and that she refused to see a doctor because she just cared about the team so much. Maybe she was being genuine, but I don't know. I feel like there's no way when people say that they could be genuine or have good intentions. I think it's just the competitive environment that is fostered on a sport where there's only a certain number of players that could be on the field at once. We are competitors in an aspect. We're teammates, but we're also competing for minutes, and you can't ignore that. The suffering together bit, though, that's really troubling because we are bonding over something that is not a good thing. And by talking about it, we're in fact also normalizing it. And it's not something that should be normalized. I talked about it before, but the contributing factor of the fear of replacement. And I spoke about it in my coaches episode. When athletes are injured, they often fear that their spot on the team will be taken by someone else. This fear is especially significant and experienced when the roster is limited or competition for positions is intense. I'm not going to give my body the time to recover so that you can take my spot, because we already talked about how you're also in pain and I can't let you win by getting my spot. A player who is sidelined due to an injury may feel that their teammates will overtake them, causing feelings of insecurity and anxiety. As a result, they may feel pressured, not just by coaches or teammates, but by their peers to return to the field before they're physically ready. In some cases, teammates might unintentionally fuel this fear by expressing that they need the injured player back on the field, often dismissing the severity of the injury in favor of winning. I will say, I know that in my position as an injured athlete, I often find myself literally stalking my teammates. I will watch all of their online recruiting videos and whatever highlights they have just to obsess over what progress they're making. It's a really unhealthy habit that I have, because obviously there's nothing I can do that can, make up for the time that I'm losing, other than, once I'm physically able to, working hard. But for right now, I can't just watch other teammates improve and work hard and feel less than, because there's literally nothing I can do about it, Now back to the competition bit. When there's this feeling of competition, it's actually creating a really toxic atmosphere where the individual's well-being is sacrificed for the sake of the team's success. Teammates might not even realize that their comments are pressuring other players to play through pain, but that cumulative effect can be incredibly damaging. I think I gotta go back to the team first mentality, just because, at least on my soccer team, it was so incredibly important. The camaraderie that develops between teammates can be another driving force behind the pressure to play. In many cases, athletes feel this sense of loyalty, and that can translate into a team first mentality. You gotta overlook yourself for the greater goal. Teammates often spend a lot of time together on and off the field, which means we develop such close interpersonal relationships. As these relationships deepen, there can be an unspoken expectation that every player is willing to sacrifice themselves for the team, even if those sacrifices come at the expense of your personal health. In many cases, teammates may feel that they owe it to the team to push through discomfort and injuries. And if they don't, they're letting their teammates down. They're letting their loved ones down. This mentality can be reinforced by the language and behavior within the team. Coaches, for example, might instill this value of sacrifice by emphasizing phrases like "leave it all on the field" or "no pain, no gain." While these sentiments are meant to be encouraging hard work, they can also perpetuate the idea that pain is a necessary component of being a dedicated athlete, which it's not. Teammates can reinforce these messages, especially when they're concerned about winning and feel that every player must contribute no matter what. When athletes begin to normalize the idea of playing through pain, it becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. They see others pushing through injuries and they assume it's part of being a dedicated athlete. And in this way, teammates become a part of a larger system that normalizes the behavior of ignoring pain. Over time, athletes may believe that is simply just part of the sport, and that every injury is temporary and nothing to worry about. This normalization of pain is so incredibly dangerous. Like I've said before, severe injuries, chronic conditions, and long-term damage. While peer pressure and team dynamics can be powerful, there's a growing awareness of this need to shift in this specific culture. Coaches, parents, and athletes themselves are increasingly recognizing the importance of listening to one's body and prioritizing long-term health over short-term success. Teammates, we can all play a critical role in supporting each other's health. Let's create an environment where we value well-being over toughness. Think about safety, communication, and care. Think about the little comments we make. Think about the judgments we make to each other. Have you ever thought to yourself that maybe your teammate is faking an injury? Well, that's just part of the problem. We don't always know the full picture, so let's stop making judgments. In today's episode, we explored how teammates can both directly and indirectly contribute to the culture of playing through pain. Peer pressure, competition, and social bonds can create an environment where athletes feel like they must push through an injury for the good of the team, even when it hurts them. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about mental health and emotional pressures that athletes put on themselves when it comes to playing through pain. Mental health can often be dismissed because it's not a visible and physical injury, but it's just as important. Thank you for listening to Sounds on the Sidelines, and remember, your health should always come first.